Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 6 o'clock in Chicago. And it's 7 p.m. right here in New York City. Hello, everybody. I'm Mad Dog Scipio, joined, as I am, God help me, by the mouth of the South, Amelia, the Pitbull Chap. How are you, Amelia?
Doing good. How are you?
You found your way in yet again to torment me.
Hey, I have to somehow.
You're doing a wonderful job, let me tell you. We have an amazing show tonight on the record. And we are, by the way, we're around the world on BRS. That's the broadband radio system. And we are welcoming Armed Forces Radio. There you go, guys. Did I do it the right way? Oh, this one. Here you go. I never served, but I keep forgetting which one you do. Anyway, but there she is, the Pitbull. We have an amazing show tonight. We're going to talk about an incident that happened in 1962, around June 11th or 12th, somewhere around there. And this has gotten a lot of play over the years. Movies have been made, books have been written, but none that told the true, full story of all the cast of characters involved in Alcatraz, The Last Escape. And that, by the way, a hell of a name for a book. With my guests tonight, they are, respectively, Ken Widner and Mike Lynch. Hello, fellas.
Hello. Hey, how are you doing?
Good to be here.
Wonderful. I have to tell you, we booked this show back in, I think, January. When I saw that there was an Alcatraz book coming out, I said, oh, stop the presses, baby. I am hopping on board this gravy train. I love the Alcatraz story because, as I told the gentleman off camera, I kind of have a connection to this story from my father. Let's talk about, first of all, let me introduce you. This is Ken Widner, is the gentleman here with the very ornate headdress above him. And he is the nephew of John and Clarence Anglin, who escaped from the Rock with their friend Frank Morris. And Mike Lynch is the co-author of this book. And my guess here, Mike, would be that largely your role in this was perhaps researched. Were you the leg man? And I'll call you the leg man. Were you the leg man?
Sure.
And so that's what you did. Ken had you running around looking for stuff.
Well, not quite that way. I first met Ken back in 2015, although not face to face. He had done a show on the History Channel documentary about the escape from Alcatraz with his brother David and Art Roderick, a former U.S. Marshal. And right. I saw that documentary on History Channel. I was very intrigued by it. I've grown up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, so I have a strong interest in Alcatraz already. That's what led me to the show. And when I heard the story about the things that Ken said, which are later going to be brought into the book, of course.
Yeah, sure.
I knew I had to connect with Ken. I knew I had to tell his story. And so eventually we were able to sort of join forces, as it were, because he had the stories. He's been researching this for many years, and I'm sure we'll get into how that happened for Ken, because he has an interesting family story about what brought him into the trail, as it were. Right. And I have a background in writing. I've written other books. I was a history major in college, so I love history. I love to do research. And so over a period of several years, we worked together. He told the stories. He provided the information. We did some research on my end. And that's where the book came from.
Fantastic. I'm going to bring Ken up here now. So, Ken, you are you are inextricably tied to this story through birth. John and Clarence were your uncles. So, what is your recollection, your memory of John and Clarence Anglin as a young man?
Well, as far as remembering them, I have no knowledge of their existence. I mean, I was just, I was born actually after Clarence arrived at Alcatraz, and I was a year and a half old when they escaped. My mom has told me the story so many times about how that at that time the family was living in Orlando, and she was ironing clothes, trying to make some extra money for the family.
Sure.
And she all we had was a radio at that time, and I was playing in front of her on the floor, and she said that all of a sudden they came a news bulletin about an escape at Alcatraz, and she said she knew right then who it was. She didn't hear the name. She grabbed me and ran next door to the neighbor who had a TV set, and I'm sitting on her lap as her brothers or posters are plastered on the screen. And so that was kind of my birth into the Alcatraz escape. It's
remarkable.
It was just from my beginning, I've been around this Alcatraz story.
Oh, I'm sure I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in your house when you were a kid.
Well, maybe not so in my house, but in the family reunions that we went to many, many times at my grandparents and around my aunts and uncles. Yes, you dedefinitely would have wanted to be a fly on the wall and listen to some of the stories that they told.
I just like I'm like a voyeur. I just want to listen. That's my kind of little kink. Let me tell everybody here. I'm going to give everybody a little heads up here. It's a story of greed, sex, lust, gangsters, strippers, and a group of prisoners who were tired of being prisoners. Escaping from the rock, as it was called, was no small feat. But Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin were no ordinary inmates. They were cunning, smart, and determined to beat the rock known as Alcatraz the Inescapable, and the rest, as they say, is history. Or is it? I've said on this show so many times, ladies and gentlemen, real life is far stranger than anything any writer could ever pen to paper. Alcatraz, The Last Escape by Ken Widner and Mike Lynch tells the story you didn't know by the men who changed history. This is Alcatraz, The Last Escape. Welcome to the show. And let's get right into it. So, one of the things we want to talk about is the psychology of John and Clarence Anglin. These two brothers were very close. They were almost joined at the hip in the things that they did. My understanding, Ken, is that John was the elder of the two. Is that correct?
He was the elder of the two. That's correct. But there was actually a third brother who was involved in most of the activity that they participated in, and he was actually older than John. John was number 6 in the lineup of 14, and Clarence was number 7 in the lineup.
Yeah, we should inform that our audience, the public here. This is a big family. This is.
Oh yes.
You got to remember, this is a time when there were no televisions and nothing to keep you occupied. so
they found things to do. They filled the time.
There were lots of children running around the Anglin household.
It was a joke. It was a joke that either my grandmother was either cooking or having babies.
There you go. One of the things we have to talk about right away is the physical presence of Alcatraz. It's not for those of you that have never been there. It's not a big place. It's it's on an island. I mean, you're talking about a small, really small island at that. And building this place, the federal government had this in mind. Here's a quick backstory. The government had this in mind to build a prison where the idea was, okay, inescapable. Who's going to escape from the rock? Where are they going to go? They're going to end up in the water, eaten by sharks and fishies. They'll become fish food. Well, that was until the U.S. government met John and Clarence Anglin. And Frank Morris, because as I said, and I want to give these guys kudos, I'll give them all the credit in the world, not for the deeds they've done, but for getting off of this impenetrable, as they call it, the rock. They did something that's been bantered about in folklore, in history. We want to now dissect the history. So I'm going to go to Ken on this one. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Mike on this one. I'm going to bring Mike up here on the big camera.
Okay.
So let's talk about this, Mike. One of the things about the physical presence of Alcatraz, I want to stick with the physical presence for just a minute. It's not, as we established, it's not a large place, but it's a complicated system of, buildings and halls and how to get in and how to get out. And a couple of guys figured out a way in and out of this place, John, Clarence, and Frank. And my question would be, what even made them think it was possible, knowing the physical structure? It was such a compacted prison. It was almost like a sardine box. It was a small space. And these were kind of like, I guess lanky would be, certainly not skinny, but lanky perhaps. They weren't huge guys, in other words. What made them even think they could pull this off?
Well, you actually have to go back before Alcatraz. John and Clarence, and then, like Ken said, their older brother, Alfred, the three of them were involved in small petty crimes. They grew up in Ruskin, Florida, a small little farming community. They were very, very poor farmers. They were dirt poor.
Yeah.
And despite coming from a large family, those three in particular took to crime early on in their youth and into their teens, because for them, because they were so poor, and they were also, because they were poor, they were made fun of by the kids. They were the family that was on the wrong side of the tracks kind of family. They were seen very in a condescending way by the community, and so there was a lot of anger for those three in particular. And so they started stealing because they wanted money for just personal things, just to have a little bit of cash. And so they were sent to reformatory schools. They were sent to jails. They were sent to local prisons in the Florida area. And in many of them, they actually broke out of those places. They would escape from those places. Alcatraz was not their first escape. So over a period of years, as they would be in and out of the prison system, most of them, they would break out. And there's a little kind of a funny story in the book that we have for Clarence in particular, that when he would escape, he would always come home. Every single time he would come home to be reunited with his family. And it became known to the authorities of his pattern of escape, so that when he did break out of a jail or prison somewhere, the authorities would just go to the house and just wait for him to show up, which he would. And then they would send him back.
And it's remarkable to think that you would think that, okay, you did this once or twice, they catch you, maybe don't do it a third and fourth time. But what's remarkable in my psyche is that while it's true that Clarence did that, John was the one who wrote all the letters. I'm guessing that Clarence wasn't much of a letter writer. It was John really had a kind of a way of putting pen to paper. always wrote to his mother. Kept her informed of what her and the brother were doing, what he and the brother were doing. Always asked how she was doing. I had this feeling in reading the book that she kind of knew she'd be seeing him at some point. Was there any indication that maybe Mama Anglin was in on this? Because it's been suggested, as you know.
No, she was not involved. She was a very strong Christian. She had definite ideas about right and wrong. And there's another little humorous story I'll throw in there just to kind of make that point that when in 1958, the brothers robbed a bank. That was their first step into the big leagues, because they were small time local petty criminals, small timers. Mm-hmm. So they decided to rob a bank. They get caught. The FBI arrests them. But between the robbing of the bank and getting arrested, they came home for one day to kind of say their goodbyes and pack up their things and go.
Right.
Well, John and Clarence, with the money that they robbed the bank, bought a washing machine for their mother because they didn't have, like I said, they were very poor. So the mom had to wash all the clothes by hand, all the dishes by hand for years and years and years to a very large family. 3 meals a day kind of a thing. So she was working hard her whole life. And John and Clarence wanted to give her something nice. So they bought her a washing machine. Well, the mother, when she realized where it had come from, she refused it. She sent it back saying, I don't want to, because she knew that was bad money. It was, it was blood money, bad money. So she refused the washing machine because they knew that they probably stole it. And because of her beliefs, as a Christian and her sense of right and wrong, she refused it. So she was not involved in the escape at all. And also just to what you said about John and Clarence writing, Clarence, John certainly wrote. Alfred wrote letters from when he was in prison, and John and Clarence did as well. He did write some letters because, just to stay in touch with the family. That was their only form of communication because they're out here all the way on the West Coast.
Sure.
And Florida is, 3,000 miles away, and there was no possible way the family was ever going to visit, and they never did.
Yeah.
And also to mention one other thing, before they got to Alcatraz, the brothers were at Leavenworth prison. That's where they were sent to after the bank robbery.
Yeah, Kansas.
Actually, where they ended up after the bank robbery.
Right.
Well, they tried to escape from Leavenworth, and that's what sent them to Alcatraz. So even in a federal prison, they were already thinking of escape. And one of the letters that John wrote after he landed at Alcatraz was that when he was on the boat that was taking him to the island, he had said to the guard that was watching him, like, hey, welcome to Alcatraz kind of a thing. Yeah. And he says, well, unfortunately, the boat's going the wrong way.
Brother, if you think you're going to escape Leavenworth, you got a better chance of breaking into the White House. That's not happening.
They got caught and were sent to Alcatraz. So even then, John was already thinking about escaping from Alcatraz even before he landed on the island. So that was just their mindset. That was just in their DNA.
And that and as I read the book, that was kind of always there for John. That was always his motivation. My understanding, Ken, is that John Anglin was the more focused of he and Clarence. My understanding about Clarence Anglin is that he had a tendency from time to time to be flighty and easily distracted. Can you shed some light on that?
I would definitely say if you took the two, Clarence would be more of the partier type kind of guy. John was, as I was told by my aunts and uncles, he was more of the jokey type kind of guy. He would be the one, if you were in a party, he would be the one telling jokes. Right. But he was also the one that had the most, I would think the ability. I would call John the MacGyver of the 1950s.
Oh,
I mean, this individual could take just about anything. I mean, a piece of scrap off the ground, and you would think, oh, well, this is nothing but trash. And they learned a long time ago how to take something nothing and build it and build something from it. And
amazing.
So you can see this quality in the escape as you look at all the items
sure
that
can.
they created.
Ken, I'll tell you what, it didn't hurt him that he was a skilled artist as well.
No. I mean, very few people knew how great of an artist.
Oh, he
John
really
was.
was amazing.
And it's
You're going to
amazing.
see some of his artwork tonight.
Right.
Not only some of the sculptures that he did, but you're going to see some paintings he did of a couple of women he was very fond of.
Well, yes,
Amelia.
definitely one was his girlfriend for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, there were two sisters, right? It was Helen and Ruth.
Yeah, that's correct. They were sisters.
And we're going
to actually Clarence dated Ruth and John dated Helen.
Right. We're going to talk about that tonight too, and how Amelia. I got to bring you into this. Okay, so you're hearing this amazing story. You've got questions. I know this.
Yeah. One of my questions is, do you think John and Clarence, the Anglin brothers, would have escaped without Frank Morris, or do you think it would have taken them a little bit longer than 6 months to escape?
Well, I will say this, if you read the FBI reports, the escape was already underway, and they included Frank Morris after the escape had already been started to be planned and formed together. John was the very first one who ever dug out of the back of the cell. John and Clarence are the ones who made all of the heads. And I'm not trying to take away from Frank Morris or, his contribution, because he definitely had some in it. But
for sure.
If you read the files, the only reason they invited Frank Morris into the escape was because Alan West, who was right beside him, needed someone to watch while he dug, and then he in turn would watch while Frank Morris dug. And the Anglin brothers, being side by side, did the same thing. So, when you watch the movie Escape from Alcatraz, you almost kind of think, oh, okay, well, Frank Morris is the brains behind this thing, and the Anglin brothers were invited as because maybe he needed somebody, but the actual truth is totally 100% different.
And that's why we wanted you guys here, because as we were talking off camera, and Mike and Ken and I, we talked a lot about how Hollywood takes creative license with the truth. Even authors who, some of them weren't even alive at the time, writing books about Alcatraz. How could they possibly know anything about Alcatraz? How do you have any real life experience with the subject matter? I mean,
right.
Even my my shortness at the time as just a wee baby, even I was born when Alcatraz occurred. I wasn't anywhere near it. I just letting it.
You were not involved, huh?
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about. Amelia mentioned Frank Morris. Though I would say the genius of Frank Morris is having the foresight. And I'm just going to put this out there. Either one of you guys that wants to jump in on it, having the foresight to have the guard order him Popular Mechanics.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
That's Popular Mechanics. Back in the day, folks, Popular Mechanics was like a who's who if you were handy with your hands and tools. Because as Ken said, the little MacGyvers were born back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit, even I bought myself an erector set from Popular Mechanics in the back when I was like 8.
Mm-hmm.
It broke. I want to talk a little bit. I'll just bring this up here now. I want to talk about the cast of characters here. There is a who's who cast of characters here. I want to jump in right into the deep end of the pool with this. The cast, of course, you got a prison, you got to have a warden. So Warden Olin Blackwell. A word or two about him, Mike.
He was actually well regarded by the inmates for the most part. He introduced a lot of policies that lessened the restrictions. I mean, at one point, Alcatraz They had a no talking policy. You couldn't talk at all in the prison when you were in your cell or in the dining hall. You can only talk when you were in the exercise yard outside.
Right.
And they had movies. They the food, they can eat as much food as they want. They had a 20-minute meal period 3 times a day, and if you ate fast, you can have 2 or 3 helpings. The food was considered very good at Alcatraz. He made sure that they were well fed. That was kind of a pride thing for him, that the food was so good that the guards ate the same food as the inmates. That's how good it was. And there were other inmates in other federal prisons that actually wanted to come to Alcatraz to be transferred there, because not only because of the food, they had the hot showers, which the other prisons didn't have. And also that you had a cell to yourself, whereas the other federal prisons, you had to share a cell with somebody. And if you got a bad prisoner, you were in a world of hurt. And so they didn't have to worry about that at Alcatraz.
And that would come in, that would be crucial. That would be crucial in the Alcatraz story. The single cell units would be absolutely critical in how the escape from Alcatraz played out. And we're going to find out in a bit.
I'll just mention one thing about that. When John and Clarence were at Leavenworth, like I said, they tried to escape. And then because of that escape, they were sent to Alcatraz as a punishment. What happened was the warden at Leavenworth sent a letter to the warden at Alcatraz warning him, saying, do not put these brothers together in the cells next to each other because they have a tendency to escape from prison. And they did it anyway, because he was so confident in that Alcatraz was inescapable. It's like, I'm not worried about them escaping. So he put them together. And like you said, that gave them the ability to work together to get out of their cells.
It became, in my opinion, and as I read the book, it became, to me, Ken, it became the critical point in the story. It really changed the dynamics of the story, because now we know, one brother is smart. The two of them together, they feed off each other. Right. Enter in Frank Morris, who had, was no slouch mentally either. Violent, yeah, absolutely. But he was a smart guy. And you put these 3 guys together, forget it. Let's talk about the next name on this list here, Fred Brizzi. His name comes up a lot, Ken. And you're laughing. This guy's been in and out of more jails. Why cannot a jail hold Fred Brizzi? Well,
Fred Brizzi really didn't spend a lot of time in jail. He did early on. He spent some time with the brothers in reform school. He wound up going to one of the boys' schools for some petty type stuff that him and another kid did. But I mean, early on, John and Clarence and Alfred all became friends with Fred Brizzi, and little did they know, as they kind of grew up with him, that he was going to become a very important part in the Alcatraz story itself.
Yeah.
I mean, without Fred being involved in this, I don't think the escape probably could have occurred. It might would have happened, but being able to make it out of the country like they did, they needed someone who had the ability to fly, who had a plane, who knew where they were going. And Fred Brizzi was that individual. And he was also working for the same individual that John and Clarence at some point in time thought they were going to be working for, right, who was also happened to be at Alcatraz at that same time.
And it's interesting that as fate would have it, Fred Brizzi, a licensed airplane pilot with a penchant for crime, meets up with 2 guys that want out so bad they could taste it. By the way, he was flying drugs for the cartels. We should point that out. Back in the 1960s and 70s, or the 60s anyway. Ken is another name for you. Take this one.
Okay.
Whitey Bulger. James Whitey Bulger.
Yes. Well, I met Whitey in 2016 as I was starting to write the first screenplay which ultimately became this book.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually met Whitey in 2012 when we were out at the Alcatraz Island for the 50th anniversary. And Whitey was in prison at that time. He'd already been caught and convicted. And he had a courier deliver a letter to my mom, introducing himself. He was in Alcatraz with John and Clarence and Frank Morris. Actually, was very good friends with them. And he wanted to introduce himself, and he wanted to tell my mom, some stories about her brothers. And so eventually I reached out to him, and me and him became very good friends. We wrote over 17 letters between each other.
Mm-hmm.
And over the 3 years, he slowly kind of took me in as a friend and as a confidant. And he started sharing details about Alcatraz and about the escape that very few people even know. In fact, he even told me in one of the letters, he said, "I'm going to tell you some things that have never been heard before. And I've never told anyone about this." And so he shared things about the escape that was just amazing.
Well, Ken, were there any indications in any of those letters that he feared for his life because he was killed in prison?
At the time he was in Leesburg, Florida, in Coleman prison, and he never really thought that his life was in jeopardy. He was in very, very bad health. I think he thought he was going to have a heart attack and die in that prison. And for him to be transferred to where he was, I believe it was just the way that the prison system was ready to dole out the justice that they thought he deserved. And and they pretty much set him up for what happened. The one thing I will say about,
for sure,
the one thing I will say, and I don't want to say in honor of him, because I'm not going to beat around the bush. I mean, he was a bad guy. He killed a lot of people.
Oh, no question about it. Absolutely, sure.
But the one thing that he really hated more than anything, and I learned this from his letters, is that the crime business, or the crime syndicate at that time, they really did have a code of ethics, and it was their number one rule was you were not to snitch on anyone. You were not to give away someone that was doing you a favor. And he really hated being painted in the trial as being a snitch. And he said,
that's the one thing gangster likes.
It. No, he did not want that.
When you call somebody a rat, that's that
was the lowest of the low for him.
Oh, please.
he thought, here I was the FBI wasn't using me. He told me I used the FBI. And
exactly.
And for them to paint him as a stool pigeon, I believe that's what got him killed in prison, because you had other members of the mafia that said, thought he had ratted them out when he didn't. And they had people waiting for him. And when they had their opportunity, they took him out.
Wow. I'm going to bring Mike in here now. Mike, I saved a couple good ones for you, kiddo.
Okay.
Why don't you take Mickey Cohen and Miss Candy Bar? By the way, Candy Bar's real name, I want to give her her real name back. It's Juanita Dale Slusher.
Yep.
That's her real name.
That's her real name.
That was Candy Bar, well-known burlesque stripper back in the 40s and 50s. She hung around a lot of gangsters. She hung around a lot of people with money, because that's how she made her money. And so why don't you take them? First of all, you talk about an odd couple. This is like two peas in a pod. She had kind of an interesting effect on Mickey Cohen. He became a gentleman around her. And he wasn't a gentleman to a lot of people.
No, he wasn't. That was really his weak spot. He really had a soft spot. He really did. I believed he really did love her. Yeah. And he wanted to marry her. Being somebody of means, he had a lot of money, of course, because of the illicit trade that he was involved with. He showered people with money. He bought favors from people. He took care of people. I mean, he was a nice guy in a way, but he was also, not a nice guy in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a scene in the book where we have Fred Brizzi, who he meets Mickey Cohen for the first time at the club where Candy was stripping.
I love the scene at the club.
and Mickey Cohen is there, and he's sitting next to Fred Brizzi, and it's like, hey, just wait till she comes out. You've never seen anybody like her. And Fred's feeling a little uncomfortable because she's doing her act on the stage. And Mickey's loving it because he just was completely enamored with her. And Fred's kind of like, you don't want to enjoy it too much because the boyfriend's sitting right next to him, and he's a you don't want to get him mad.
Absolutely.
So, and I think for Candy, I think she liked Mickey. I think she liked the attention that he gave her because he was everybody knew who Mickey was. He was well liked. He, the community, he was sort of a folk hero in a way to a lot of people. And he felt really persecuted by the authorities that were always after him, trying to catch him on things.
Right.
And I think she liked that kind of attention from him, somebody who was notorious but famous.
Sure.
And I don't think she loved him. She never married him. He wanted to marry her.
Right.
And eventually, some years later, when he was eventually convicted of tax evasion, just same as Al Capone, that's how the government got him to Alcatraz. Yeah. She turned state's evidence against him. She testified against Mickey Cohen, which hurt him very deeply because she had actually escaped or left the United States for a drug charge that was a bit trumped up. They were trying to get her. Yeah. And she flees to Mexico. Well, Mickey gives her a fake ID, gives her money, gives her a hiding place while she's kind of laying low. And he told her, don't leave Mexico. You'll get arrested. Well, eventually she gets kind of bored. She doesn't want to stay there anymore. So she goes back into the US and she gets rearrested, and she spent several years in prison for this drug charge. But Mickey tried to protect her, and she was kind of his undoing in a way.
Yeah. We should also point out that she was friendly with not only Mickey Cohen, but she was friendly with Jack Ruby.
Yep.
Jack Rubenstein, if you don't know who he is, November 22nd, 1963, heavily involved. Jack Ruby was a club owner who hired strippers like Candy Bar and of that ilk. The guy who shot Lee Harvey Oswald, she was his friend.
Yep.
Another name I want to throw at you, Bumpy Johnson. Talk to me about Bumpy Johnson. How does he play into all of this?
Who do you want to? Do you want me or Ken?
To you, Mike. Well, I still have your name up here.
So Bumpy Johnson grew up in New York City. He was a crime boss that sort of rose through the ranks. He was kind of like a street kid that again, small timer, petty crimes kind of a thing, and sort of got the attention of kind of the more established crime people in New York City. You had different gangs, different groups, in different parts of the neighborhood. And he kind of rose through the ranks. He had an ability to get things done. And eventually he gets into a turf war with Dutch Schultz that lasts for a number of years. A lot of people killed on both sides.
Oh, horrible.
And he eventually, gets sent to prison, federal prison, and eventually lands at Alcatraz at the same time as Mickey Cohen and Whitey Bulger. So you have these three notorious, underworld figures at the prison at the same time as the brothers.
Remarkable.
And Bumpy was sort of the leader of the Black community at Alcatraz, because Alcatraz was a segregated prison. Not many people know this.
Oh yeah.
The Black prisoners, inmates, were kept at a certain part of the prison, and the non-Blacks, so whites and others, were kept in the rest of the prison. And even in the exercise yard, you kept your distance from each other. And Mickey and Bumpy were both from New York, and so Mickey was Jewish, and so they both understood what racism was, persecution was, hatred towards them. So they had a kind of a friendship with each other, and they used to walk around the yard together. Right. And the two sides didn't like that very much, but they were like, I don't care. We're friends, and we respect each other, and they were powerful enough to get away with it. But Bumpy, he was in charge of the Black inmates, and there's Ken mentioned before there was a fourth potential escapee, Alan West, he was all part of the plan, and he was, he helped do some of the things to prepare for the escape. But the night of the escape, and we'll probably get into that story in a little bit of why he didn't make it. He was a racist, and he was a hothead, and he was
sure.
You didn't know what he was going to do, and he was always going after the black inmates, and where it became a problem, because at one point, one of the things that Whitey tells in his letters is that there was sort of a code at Alcatraz that when you were walking down the hallway, you're being escorted or you're going to a meal or something,
right?
You didn't look in the cells, because you always respected each other's privacy.
Straight ahead.
And so there's one night when Alan was digging out the back of a cell, that the little air vent in the back, it was, Frank Morris was watching him, making sure that the guards, when they came, he would signal him. And so he's doing some digging. Well, a couple black inmates were walking by. They looked into the cell. They sort of broke the code, and they saw him digging. And it became known to John and Clarence and Frank that he had been discovered preparing for the escape. Well, for the black inmates who hated Alan West because he was going after the black inmates and causing little fights and harassing them and saying, racist things against them, this was their golden opportunity to rat him out and sort of curry favor with the guards and get rid of this guy whom they didn't like. And so there's a bit of a debate between Ken and I about who actually talked to Bumpy Johnson. He feels that it was Frank Morris. I feel it was either John or Clarence, but one of the three has to go to Bumpy Johnson to kind of make peace, to make sure that the guys under his, kind of under his wing didn't rat it out, because he was in favor of the escape, because he wanted to see him get away because of his friend Mickey Cohen, and just kind of stick it to the prison. And so because of that, because of Bumpy Johnson and his willingness to cooperate with the three, that kept the escape plan alive, because it could have ended right there.
Ken, let me bring you in here. I want to bring you up here. Let's talk about the next couple of people. And of course, Mike mentioned Alan West. He remained a career criminal his entire life. There was no reforming Alan West. One of the things that, for every man involved in this story, of course, there's an equally fascinating female character. Okay. So we're going to discover, and since you're the ladies' man here, Ken, I'm going to let you handle the women, because we mentioned Candy Bar. Let's talk about Jeanette Anglin, Helen Taylor, and Ruth Taylor. Let's talk about those three women.
Okay.
First of all, let's talk about Helen and Ruth, the sisters.
Okay.
How do they, at what point in the lives of the Anglin brothers do Helen and June end up, and Helen and Ruth end up with Clarence and John? How early on in this story?
Well, the story with John and Helen actually began when they were in elementary school. I mean, he meets Helen, in elementary school, when they're actually being tormented and bullied. Because you have to kind of go back and think about how poor this family was.
Sure.
I don't think we actually covered that in depth enough, because I can describe my grandparents' house when they first built it with their sons, and it was picture this. Now, it was a 4-room house that had no plumbing, no electricity. It had windows, but it didn't have any screens. There were 14 kids living in that house, along with their mom and dad.
God bless.
At some point in time, my grandfather's brother and his wife and 6 other kids moved in. They took baths on the back porch and wash tub, using water that my grandmother washed clothes in. So paint that picture, and then you think about someone that's in elementary school and he's wearing clothes that my grandmother has made out of sackcloths. Yeah, and so for him to find a young girl named Helen that was interested in him and would give him the time of the day just probably melted his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so early on, he fell in love with Helen, and it
Right.
became more of a Romeo and Juliet, because her father, they were from the upper side of town. I mean, they weren't as poor as the Anglin
Right.
family were, and they were not, the rest of their, her sister and her were not getting in trouble like John and Clarence was. So they were always trying to separate the two. But, at some point in time, they kind of do. But, true love is going to bring you back together. And so
Absolutely,
at
of course.
some point in time, Helen, after her father realizes, okay, I've got to, ship you out of Ruskin, and send you up to Ohio to break this as they got older. She comes back, she's married, but her and John start this romantic relationship all over again, as though
Yeah.
like it had never even ended. And her sister, I wouldn't say that her and Clarence were romantically, so much involved that they wanted to get married as like John and Helen was.
Right.
But they were, I mean, if it had not been for the robbery,
Would they be called today, Ken, like friends with benefits?
yeah, they would have, if you read some of the letters that John wrote to his mom about
Mm-hmm.
he pretty much mentioned her in about, I'd probably say 2/3 of his letters.
Right.
And he called her his queen. And if he
Well,
had
yeah.
got out, he was going to marry her. And it was, you could see love written all over it. So,
In fact, it's funny you say that because I wrote next to Helen Taylor's name, the Queen.
yeah.
Let's talk about Jeanette and Ralph Anglin, I guess the two responsible for these these guys.
Yeah. So Jeanette, though, was married to Alfred. Alfred was the oldest of the three.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about, Alfred, which is kind of weird, strange, is that, when he married Jeanette, she was so young. She was only 16 and could not get married in the state of Florida. So they eloped into Georgia, where they didn't need a signature to be able to get married. And he actually lied about his age. He was in his 20s. She was
Wow.
16, and of course that was kind of like a oh gosh, the movie I flees my mind right now, but the guy who was a famous piano player that married his cousin,
Oh,
who was
that
so
was
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh
Jerry
yeah,
Lee
Great
Lewis.
Balls of
Yeah,
Fire.
yeah.
Jerry
Great
Lee
balls of
Lewis
fire.
story
They
all
sure
over.
were, man.
But
Oh, good Lord.
she was
Um,
she was so young when they got married.
yeah, that seemed to be, man, I don't know. There's something. I lived in Tennessee for a long time, and they like them young down there, man. I don't understand it. Um, I want to bring both you guys up on the camera here. There is a turning point in this story that happens before Alcatraz, many years before it, and it's Mariana Reform School.
Oh my God.
How did whoever wants to jump in on this one? How did the incidents at Mariana Reform School shape, alter, or affect the characters of these guys? And did you make the viewers aware that some years later, back in around 2012 to 2014, a number of young African American boys were found buried on the property?
Right.
You want to take that, Ken or Mike, whoever wants to jump in on that one?
Well, I mean, I'll take part of it, and I'll let Mike finish up the rest of it. I
Okay,
do
you
know
got it.
that both John and Clarence and Frank, not Frank Morris, but Fred Brizzi, all wound up at Mariana Boys Industrial School
Mm-hmm.
from some petty crimes that they had done, and they were sent there to do, I guess, to kind of straighten them out.
Right.
Interesting that Clarence wrote home and told about how that at the school, I guess because they were trying to teach them a trade, but they were teaching them how to unlock combination locks, and Clarence actually Clarence actually won a contest because he was
I love
able to lock the most locks in a short period of time. Little did they know,
That's
all they were
amazing.
doing was giving him this
A
this
trademark worker.
skill that he didn't have.
Exactly. Exactly.
But the interesting thing was when they were in this school, they did notice that there were strange things occurring. Boys, missing.
Yeah.
Most of them were boys that were loners, that didn't have family, were orphans, that wound
Yeah.
up, there by whatever crime they might have committed. And it was, I think it was one of the reasons why they said, we need to get out of here. And they did form an escape. I think Fred Brizzi is the one who actually broke out, but
Yeah.
they early on they knew this was not the place that we needed to be, and
Oh, for sure.
and
Absolutely.
they really honed their skills into getting out. And Mike can probably throw you some more
Yeah.
information, Marianne.
Well, there was also a lot of abuse,
Mhm.
physical abuse that was the staff were committing against the boys. And some years later, eventually the school did close down eventually, but there were a lot of
Right.
rumors, a lot of talk, a lot of unflattering kinds of things that were happening at the school that were kind of leaking out, but no one ever really investigated. The state just sort of let things go as it were. Well, eventually it's closed down, and then people started coming forward, kind of telling their stories, sort of like what happened in the Catholic Church. The stories really start coming out from the victims, and they started looking at the property and finding hundreds of boys that were buried there in unmarked graves.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming, I'm sure it's a huge scandal now, but it's too late. They're gone, and their stories haven't been told. And so, a lot of terrible things happened there, and they were quick to get out as quick as they could.
Absolutely. We are going to take a short break for a public service announcement. We will be right back right after this. What's the buzz, Popcast? Welcome to K-Pop Radio in Seoul, South Korea. Welcome aboard and welcome to the buzz. For expert bodywork and collision repair, there's only one place in Clementon, New Jersey. It's Bruce's Collision Center at 114 White Horse Pike in Clementon, New Jersey. Call Bruce at 856-783-1475. And tell him the Mad Dog sent you from WWTF Radio, global and around the world. And we are back. We're going to take a little video trip right now. We're going to take I'm going to tell everybody, get on the bus. We're going to take a ride to Alcatraz. You ready for this? Check this out. And you're looking at the interior of Alcatraz. Now, did this happen while you guys were there?
Yeah, we were the ones that took that picture.
Oh, that was you. Okay, I was going to ask.
Wow, fantastic.
It looks like there's a film being made. There's somebody making a movie here.
Well, not a movie. 2 years ago, Ken and I were invited to go on the TV show Expedition Unknown, hosted by Josh Gates. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's on the Discovery Channel, and he had been wanting to do an Alcatraz story for a lot of years because that's just kind of right, in his area of expertise of discovering mystery or uncovering mysteries and trying to solve them. So we were invited to be on the show, and so they allowed us to go to Alcatraz for a week and film the episode about John and Clarence and Frank Morris and the escape, and our version of what happened in the escape after they got out of the prison with the raft and the boat and eventual flight out of the country. And then in the second half of the episode was where we believe they landed and lived their lives for a number of years. And so that was the second half of the episode.
And we're now looking at the three guys who made history. Frank Morris to the far left, Clarence Anglin in the center square, and John Anglin, of course, always looking like he's pissed off.
I will tell you something that Whitey Bulger told me about John Anglin.
What's that there, Ken?
He told me that the first time he ever saw John walk across the courtyard, I guess he was up on the steps with Frank Morris, and he said John reminded him of Steve McQueen. And if you look at him, he really kind of does favor Steve McQueen.
He does kind of favor him,
Yeah,
doesn't he?
does.
He sure does.
Yeah.
Again, the three guys. Have you guys ever seen this?
Yes.
This is for those of you who don't have the blessing of watching us on video tonight. We're looking at a photo, an age progressed photo of Clarence Anglin. Now, this would have been Clarence circa 2017, 2016. Is that what they're saying?
That's what it kind of looks like.
That's my understanding on that. Do we know when he passed away? We know when John passed.
Well,
I'm wanting to say maybe.
Yeah, if we really don't know when either of the two passed away. I will say I believe that John outlived Clarence, and the reason why I said that is because Clarence was a very heavy smoker.
Right.
John smoked some, but not as much as Clarence did.
Yeah.
And, in the photo that we do have of them in 1975 or in the early 70s, between 70 and 75. Right. Clarence is. You can still see a pack of cigarettes in his front pocket.
You sure in hell can. Yes, sir.
So he was still.
This is a photo of Frank Morris. Right. And it looks like he might be 14 or 15 in this picture.
I think he's 15 like in that one.
This guy was troubled from really from his youth.
In and out of, foster homes. He never really had a home to own and no real parents, which was really kind of sad if you think about it. He pretty much grew up with his mom and not wanting him and never really kind of knowing his dad. So.
Yeah. This is a fascinating photo. This is actually taken at the time of the escape. These were photos taken from prison guards and police when they finally were able to siege the island.
Well, this was the next morning. So that photo we're looking at right now is John Anglin's cell. And the interesting thing was that the very next morning, after they discovered that they had escaped, one of the first things they did before anything was ever touched was they brought photographers in and they took photographs of the cell. So it really, and this, I don't know whether or not you're going down the alley that I want to go down at some point, but this to me is a very important photo right here that you're looking at.
It's critical. Absolutely.
Yeah, very critical. And not only this one, but really the photos of the cell of Clarence and Frank Morris, because it really paints. There is more to those photos than what most people realize.
I don't think people understand the gravity, the seriousness of what we're talking about here. We're talking about three men who painstakingly hollowed out a wall.
Yes.
Okay. Wall. We're talking about brick wall, brick and mortar, and who took the time not only to get the proper proportions of their faces as if they were laying sideways on a bed, but they actually put real human hair on these. Here's plaster of Paris.
Here's something that'll blow your mind is that's not the first time they ever did that.
Oh, I know. I read a little bit about that. Well, we could talk about that on the next show because you guys got to come back.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've got like
I want to talk about the cells, those 3 pictures in depth the next time we come on.
yeah.
Because they're, like I said, I have the actual 3 cell high dimension photographs.
Yeah.
And I can talk some talk about those.
Oh yeah. And what we're looking at now is the mask, the plaster of Paris mask on the bed.
Right.
A couple of blankets shoved underneath it to appear as the body, and we're looking at the escape hole underneath the sink.
Right.
I want people, you can't understand or understate the importance, the historical significance of these photos. It's absolutely essential. That's the letter, by the way.
Right.
There's Mickey, and there's Candy Bar.
So if you back up 2 photos.
Yes, sir.
So, not that one right there. That house is the house that they first moved into in Brazil. And me and Mike and Josh Gates, we took Josh Gates to this house. And Josh, we have a photo of Josh standing in front of that house, taking a picture, holding this actual picture that you're looking at right now. I mean, we actually found that house in Brazil where they first moved to when they went to Brazil.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. I love this stuff. I just want people to just, if you have a video, watch this. It's just amazing. Again, these photos were taken the very next morning. Very next morning. Here's what surprised me about, and I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm sure of course you have, but there's a guitar up there.
Yes.
Which is utterly astounding to me that they would even let them have a guitar.
Actually, that's one of the crucial story elements that made the escape possible, because from 5 to 9, because 9 was lights out, they sort of had like a free time that they were all in their cells. They can kind of do whatever they wanted. Well, for a lot of the inmates, the way that they passed time was learning how to play a musical instrument. And Clarence was already a guitar player. His mother had gotten him a guitar years earlier. And Frank Morris, if you see the movie Escape from Alcatraz, the one thing that is accurate in the movie is that Frank Morris did order an accordion. And so for the 4 hours, that was their time to dig in the back of the cell. And of course, digging is going to make noise. Well, the other inmates were all, playing harmonica, guitars, the accordion or whatever instrument they enjoyed. And that made noise, and that covered the sounds of the digging in the back of the cell. So the other inmates either willingly or unknowingly were helping them with the escape during that time.
It's fascinating to me because do you guys know the story of a guy who escaped from prison using a guitar string to bevel through the bars?
No,
I don't remember all the details to it.
Yeah, but the guy used a guitar string. In fact, the number 6 string, which is the heavy one.
Right.
And he used it to bevel the bars. He cut a bar with guitar string, which is, you want to talk about some painstaking work. You got to have some patience for this stuff.
Well, they had a lot of time on their hands.
They sure the hell did. Here you go. I love these age progression pictures.
Oh my God.
This is a real photo.
Yes.
When I saw this, the hair on the back of my head stood up. It really did.
That actually was done in our 2015 show that we did with History Channel, which was called Alcatraz Search for the Truth. And when I found that photo of John and Clarence in Brazil, and I presented it to the U.S. Marshal who was working the show with us, he took that photo and he took it to an individual by the name of Michael Street, who at that time was teaching at the U.S. Marshals Academy this software that he used that you're looking at right now, that he did the analysis on that photo. And that other photo of John is a photo when he was arrested in Ohio. And he took that photo and did an exact match. I mean, I'm talking about like 99.2% match.
Oh, it doesn't get any closer than that, Ken.
No. Well,
it doesn't get any closer. I saw that and went, that's the guy.
Yeah, actually, we did an Edition Unknown. Josh Gates hired in 2022, he hired the most leading AI company that was doing work for the federal government on tracking down people that had been trafficked. And they came back with a 99.7% match on John Anglin. There
is no doubt in my mind that we are looking at John and Clarence. This is Brazil, South America.
This is in the early 70s.
No question in my mind, based on the physicality, the forensics, the point-for-point match.
Yep.
Because I did a point-for-point match, and they come back 99.9%.
You know,
that's how, and you don't get any more accurate than that.
Nope. I will say this about this photo. To me, I think it's one of the most important photos of the story of Alcatraz, because I don't care what anybody says. You can have any of the FBI agents or any of the U.S. Marshals, you know, that they can say whatever the hell they want to say. I'm telling you that you cannot have over 5 to 6 independent companies that we've hired ourselves come back and do an exact match on John Anglin in 1970. You can't tell me that this doesn't close the case.
Brother, let me tell you, this photo, and I don't think it's an understatement to say this.
No,
this photo is the holy grail of the Alcatraz case. If you look at this picture, most time, and you can do this as an experiment if you want. We've done this. If you put sunglasses on a person, they will alter their appearance 3% around the face. Minimal, but enough to throw off some people, right?
Right.
Not in this case. The sunglasses on these two guys actually gives more credibility to who they are. The sunglasses on these guys accentuate their face.
Yes.
And you can just look at the pictures. Look at their young pictures. Look at them there. It's point for point.
One of the reasons I discovered this picture was, if you're looking right now at John on the other side, you'll notice a hair part that runs down. And that was one of the first things that caught my eye when I discovered this picture, was that hair part. And then you look at that bone structure that's on the front of his temple. And then, oh my gosh, it's just like, I sat there and almost fell out of my chair when I found this photo. I was like, I cannot believe that we've had this, the family has had this photo for almost 20 years, and we never realized who it was.
Wow. And this photo here, Ken, this is also Brazil.
No, actually, that is James Whitey Bulger.
That's Whitey. Okay, I got you.
He and a lot of his letters, he sent me postcards and pictures and things that he would sign. And this was in Acapulco, Mexico, which I was
going to say to you, it looks like either Acapulco or Sao Paulo.
Yes, I actually found the location on Google Maps. He's at a Catholic church, and he's sitting on the wall, which is looking back toward the city. And it's very interesting that he's there at this time, because we really believe he was there meeting with John and Clarence and Frank Morris early on, because we believe he became involved in the drug industry that Mickey Cohen was using the brothers and Frank Morris. Fred Brizzi. We believe he at some point in time took it over.
Right. Now, what are we looking at here, guys?
This was in 2012 when we went out for the 50th anniversary. The island really kind of treated my mom and my sister, the only two living relatives at the time.
Mhm.
I mean, like oh my gosh, they're like gods. I mean, this is the head park ranger at that time. His name was Cantwell, and he when we came onto the island, he fired up this old truck that has been in many photographs, and he drove us around, and he allowed me to drive it. So
Right.
I asked, and he said, "Okay." I said, "Here, I'm gonna jump behind the wheel and take off." So I'm
We've
driving.
seen a little bit of the sculptor work of John Anglin. Now you're looking at the a pencil sketch.
Well,
done
actually, no, oil painting.
Oh,
So if you're
Oh,
looking
it is oil.
on
Oh, I
the
thought
left,
they were pencil sketches.
no,
Okay.
they're actually oil paintings, and we have them in our possession today. But on the left is
That's
Helen.
your retirement there, brother. I got news for you.
On the
That's
left is
worth a
Helen.
small fortune, kid.
Yes. On the left is
Beautiful.
Helen, and in the center is a rock with water crashing on it that Clarence painted,
Yeah.
and then right is Ruth. And John painted both of the women, and
Yeah.
Clarence painted the rock scene.
I'll tell you what, you can certainly understand why John called her the queen. She's a beautiful woman.
She is
She
a
really
very
is. Pretty lady. Okay. This is what every escape artist needs here, folks. Tell everybody what we're looking at.
well. You're looking at pieces of tools that they found. Hacksaw blades. On the very far right is the paintbrush that John was found in John's cell when he painted the paintings.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, I can't quite make out what some of those are, but they look like they're pieces of material that
Mhm.
they discovered.
Yeah. And here are yet again
That's me and Mike
Yeah.
recreating a scene. If you go back a few photos, we actually discovered this. Keep going now. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going. Oh, right there. So if you were to zoom into this, we found this
I got you. Yeah, I see.
by accident. And we really believe at the very end, that is Clarence standing up. This was taken in April of 1962. And right beside him, it looks like it's John. And right beside him would be Frank Morris. And there's someone bending down, which we believe is Whitey Bulger.
The people who took this photo, or the person who took this photo, did they realize at the time what they were doing, or was this just happen chance?
No, the escape was still being put together. They didn't know what was going on right now. I mean, they, really and truly, when the photograph was taken, they had already been through the hole.
Yeah.
And it's funny, they were looking out into the bay, which is exactly where they were about to head.
Yeah. Kind of sizing it up.
Sizing it up. Yeah.
Remarkable.
Now, what you're looking at,
Remarkable.
a postcard. Well, that's a postcard that Whitey Bulger sent me. I actually sent him the photo of the 1970 with John and Clarence, and on the back he ID'd them and said,
Yeah.
Anglin Brothers in Brazil.
Well, let me ask you a question in that regard.
Okay.
This infinite, now critical, crucial piece of merchandise of history.
Right.
This photo, how did it come into your possession? Who took the photo? Do we know who took it?
Yes, we
Do
do.
we know
Yes,
who
we
it
do.
was sent to?
Well, so you remember the story of Fred Brizzi, the guy who
Yes, sir.
grew up with them and who flew them out
Mhm.
of out of the San Francisco
So
area,
Fred took the photo then.
and then eventually into Brazil. Well, he was in constant contact with them throughout until he died.
Oh,
And
all right.
in 1970, he was down in Brazil on their farm, and he's the one who took this photo, along with the other photos of their house and another couple of photos of their property. And in 1992, one of the older brothers who we found out later was involved in the escape. Not so much, I mean, he wasn't, his part was more of setting people up,
Right.
people and be in certain places. I mean, and he actually knew he was the only family member who knew exactly where they went.
Yeah.
So he brings Fred Brizzi to the Anglin family in 1992. And we really believe it was more of he wanted to share with the rest of the family what happened to their brothers.
Yeah.
And to let them know they were okay. Well, Fred, he tells the family the story of where they were at and how he met them. And he gave my mom those photos, but he never told in the interview, at least I can hear it because we have the audio tape of it.
Right.
And he never tells about, he never says that's John and Clarence. And so my mom pretty much sticks them in, a drawer and keeps them there for all these years. And when we're doing the investigation for the 2015 show, I started going through all these photos and along with the FBI files, and that's how I discovered it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe it. When I showed this to History Channel, they fell out. They were like, oh my God.
I'll tell you what, it's
wow. Unbelievable.
We are looking at a letter purportedly written by John Anglin and sent to authorities. This is circa 2000.
That would be 2012.
Yeah, 2012 is what.
Yeah, and it's not real.
Oh, okay.
It's bogus.
Oh, okay. I want to read it anyway. Can I read this real quick?
I've read it
because we're going to talk about this. I had a suspicion reading it that it was kind of, we used to say, it's a Fragosi, it's fake.
Yes.
My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely. Frank Morris passed away in 2008. His grave is in Alexandria under another name, and my brother Clarence died in 2011. If you announce on TV that I will be, promised to go to jail for no more than a year and get medical attention, I will write back to let you know exactly where I am. So he's trying to cut a deal here.
Right.
Look, that was the first giveaway. Nobody in their right mind is going to cut a deal.
No.
Number one. Number two, I will write back and let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke. This is for real and the honest truth. That's the second giveaway that was a fake letter. If it's real, you don't need to reiterate that it's real and add in, oh, by the way, this is the honest truth. How did you guys discover that this was, as they say, not on the legit, not on the level?
So whenever I've met the acting U.S. Marshal, his name was Michael Dyke in 2012.
Right.
He actually had this this letter in his possession at the time. He never told us about it. And we didn't actually hear about it until 2017. Right. 2018. I think it's when they let the family know that they had it. And they had already done analysis on the handwriting, and none of the U.S. Marshals believed that was John who had written the letter, nor had someone else write it. But one of the reasons, what really kind of stuck out to me was, and the reason why I don't believe it is because, back in 1958, the Anglin family was very poor, but this is 2012. Right. None of us are poor anymore. I mean, we're not rich, but we're not poor. Right. And there was no way in heck that John would have reached out to them and not reached out to his own family members. Yeah. He was dying of cancer and he needed help. And by the way, in Brazil, they have some of the best healthcare system, and it's totally free. Why would you leave Brazil if you were dying of cancer, you needed health care.
Exactly.
To the U.S. and think you're going to get better health care in a prison system.
It didn't ring true to me on several levels.
No,
not the least of which I did some side-by-side handwriting analysis, and it's not even close.
No.
The handwriting's not even close.
No.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I gotta have you back. I am up against my time limit here. I have May 14th available. Can I bring it back then?
What time on May 14th?
Probably work that out.
Can we do 7 o'clock?
The same time as today, 7 p.m. Eastern time.
The Tuesday, right?
Yes,
sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can do a Tuesday.
Okay.
All right, Amelia, mark it down.
I got it.
Because this
Now
there's
you got
so much. I
that
barely scratched the surface.
There's
Yeah.
way more to tell. Lots of more stories.
And I waited a long time to have these guys on here, and I'm not letting them go.
Right.
I'll tell you what, Amelia, tell everybody what's coming up. What we got?
Of course, absolutely. Tomorrow we're going to be doing an Epstein show by popular demand. We're going to bring that show back.
Oh man, Jeffrey Epstein, alive and witness protection, or deader than a doornail?
Yes.
So says an informant from WitTech that Jeffrey Epstein is alive and well and living in witness protection under the auspices and guise of WitTech.
Yes.
We will find out tomorrow if it's on the level or if it's all BS.
Absolutely.
It's going to either way. It's going to be a very interesting story, for sure.
Absolutely. Wednesday, the 8th, is Charles Manson, again by popular demand.
We are going to revisit the legacy and impact of possibly the most psychotic serial killer that ever walked planet Earth, Charles Winston Manson. First of all, you knew he was going to be screwed up in the head with a name like Winston. Okay? Who names their kid Winston? Anyway, but I will tell you what, Ken Widner, amazing book. Mike Lynch, thank you, my friend, for getting back to me that fateful day in January. I am so glad that we hooked up. We are going to reconnect again on this program at the same time, 7 p.m. on May 14th for Alcatraz, The Last Escape, Part 2. On behalf of Amelia, the Pitbull Chapman, on behalf of Ken, I ain't playing no games, Widner, and Mike, I want some lunch, Lynch. I am Mad Dog, Scipio, and this is What's the Buzz, America's Best Podcast. We'll see you tomorrow night, folks. Bye-bye.